Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for February 5th, 2025. We're going to start off today with some information about a fascinating podcast out of Australia that I discovered yesterday. It's called Secrets We Keep, Should I Spit? Here is a short synopsis. A simple DNA test kit might seem like a fun way to trace your family history, but new Listen Our original podcast reveals there's far more at stake than discovering your great-grandmother's origins. Award-winning journalist Claire Ard spent 4 years investigating the complex world of DNA data for the latest season of the award-winning Secrets We Keep podcast, Should I Spit? The podcast uncovers some startling revelations: the Mormon Church's unexpected involvement in DNA data collection, a multi-billion-dollar industry profiting from genetic profiles, and how Australian police are using new DNA technologies that could transform criminal investigations. Our DNA holds information about what we look like, where we come from, family relatedness, our propensity for disease, and even mental illness, Ard explains. What concerns me is this gradual integration of advanced DNA capabilities and search methods into our criminal justice system is occurring without a public conversation. The investigation takes listeners from Salt Lake City, home to both the Mormon Church and the heart of the global DNA industry, to rural New South Wales, where a mass DNA screening operation took place. Along the way, Ard discovers how innocent people can get caught up in murder investigations simply because a distant relative wanted to explore their family tree. Listener, head of factual Claire Weaver, says the series comes at a crucial time, both here in Australia and around the world. We've reached a point where you can't afford to ignore the value and potential consequences of giving up your DNA. For anyone who's ever considered taking a DNA test or has family members who have, Should I Spit promises to be an eye-opening exploration of privacy, security, and the unexpected places our genetic information might end up. Let's listen to one tiny little clip.
My dad had submitted a DNA sample through the LDS Church, and it eventually led to me becoming a suspect in a murder.
I started listening to it yesterday afternoon while cleaning my house and continued this morning on my 3-mile run. I'm halfway through the 5th episode and I won't say anything else to give it away, but the way the Mormon Church is involved is very interesting. I give it 5 stars out of 5. You should definitely give it a listen. And now we will go to some news out of Virginia. A local medical practice focused on women's health is expanding its presence in the West End. Virginia Physicians for Women is planning to open a new location at 5600 Monument Avenue, where a now vacant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints building currently stands. VPFW bought the 1.7-acre property last month for $3.5 million from the Mormon Church. The nearly 30,000 square foot building would be raised to make way for a 2-story, 32,000 square foot medical office. CEO Ronnie Milligan said VPFW would either be the sole occupant of the building or would be the primary user and lease a small portion of it to a tenant. The new office is anticipated to open in spring of 2027 and is expected to cost $17 million, which includes construction equipment, land, and the expense of tearing down the church. Services held at the Monument Avenue site have been moved to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at 10660 Duryea Drive in South Richmond. I have thought so many times about what I would do if I was able to buy an abandoned LDS church. Maybe a half coffee shop, half a bar type situation. What would you do if you could get your hands on an old LDS church? Now let's go to the church newsroom, where it says Elder Ulysses Soares of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles told global faith leaders gathered in Washington, D.C. on Monday, February 3rd, 2025, that protecting religious freedom is a, quote, key to peace and stability around the world. Interesting side note, in the list of headlines involving the Mormon Church, right under this one where Ulysses says that the key to peace and stability is religious freedom, I saw MSN.com's headline, LDS Church plans to sue over proposed temple, and Cron.com's headline, Latter-day Saint Church plans to sue North Texas town over temple project. It seems religious liberty in the U.S. isn't always being used for peace and stability, but to sue so that the church does not have to follow local zoning regulations. Back to the article from the church newsroom. The apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints spoke at the opening reception of the 2025 International Religious Freedom Summit, held at the House of the Americas. This is an annual 2-day summit that supports religious freedom worldwide. More than 90 organizations representing more than 30 faith traditions are participating to discuss ways to advance international religious freedom. According to IRF, nearly 80% of people around the world live in countries with high levels of restrictions on religion. Religious liberty matters, the apostle said, because faith helps people find purpose, fosters respect, and encourages personal responsibility, hard work, and strong families. I am not sure how respectful the Mormon church has been to other faiths. Remember that one time, somewhat recently, that Brad Wilcox, who is now the first counselor in the Mormon church's General Young Men's presidency, said that everyone else, besides those that are Mormon, are just playing church? Back to the article. These virtues flowing from a flourishing and diverse religious landscape serve to mend and tighten the fabric of our shared world in ways perhaps nothing else can, leading in turn to the united and peaceful societies for which we yearn, Elder Soares said. He concluded his remarks by pointing to Church President Russell M. Nelson's April 2023 call for peacemakers. This is absolutely the church's buzzword for 2025, peacemakers. While peace building does not always come easily or naturally, it is a prize worthy of our finest and most determined efforts, Elder Soares said. The reward for such sacrifice and labor, however, is a gift that transcends even this world. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus taught, for they shall be called the children of God. May we each consider how we may become better peacemakers at home and abroad. God's blessings be upon you in the most honorable cause. Now let's go to myheraldreview.com to see how the church has, or possibly has not, been peacemakers in Arizona. The Arizona Court of Appeals will hear oral arguments twice this month in a case out of Bisbee that continues to provoke national discussion about the fact some organized religions require protecting adult predators rather than the children being subjected to ongoing harm. Children being harmed? Doesn't sound like peace to me. The Court of Appeals is considering a lawsuit with roots dating back nearly 15 years. It involves Paul Douglas Adams, who at the time was a U.S. Border Patrol agent, and his wife, Laisa. They were charged with more than 24 felonies related to the abuse of their 2 daughters. The couple also had 4 sons. Paul Adams confessed to the lay bishop of the Bisbee ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2010 or 2011 that he abused his oldest daughter, who was about 5 years old at the time. But the abuse was never reported outside the Mormon church hierarchy. The girl continued to be abused until early 2017, shortly after Interpol learned of a video depicting one of the numerous times. Adams would also later admit to having abused an infant daughter born in 2015. On February 12th, a 3-judge panel of the Arizona Court of Appeals, Division 2, will hear oral arguments at the state courthouse in Tucson about whether John Herod, the bishop who first heard Adams' confession, had a duty to report the abuse. Herod was also a popular doctor in Sierra Vista, but attorneys for the church assert he only learned of the abuse in his role as bishop, and such information was confidential under a clergy penitent privilege. You know what really gets me here is that the bishops were told not to tell law enforcement, but he sure as shared the information with other people. I was a Relief Society president twice, and I sat in ward council meetings many times, or ward gossip sessions as I like to call them, and consistently heard about things that had been shared in confidence with the bishop. Let's go back to the article. Then, on February 25th, oral arguments will be presented to a different 3-judge appellate panel at the University of Arizona's James E. Rogers School of Law as to whether the Utah-based corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other church members can be held civilly negligent for the abuse which occurred after Adams' initial confession. Herod, the bishop, said he asked both parents for permission to report the girl's abuse to authorities, but they refused. He also hoped Louisa Adams would report the abuse once she heard Paul Adams' confession, Herod told a federal agent after Adams unalived himself. The second bishop, Robert Kim Mousy, learned in 2012 of Adams' earlier confession to Herod. Mousy oversaw efforts the next year to excommunicate Adams during a process that included Adams making some further type of confession of abuse, which would have likely been to a high council. So now it's not just Herod and Mousy who know about the abuse, but quite a few other church leaders. Arizona Revised Statute 13-3620A requires clergy, along with medical professionals, mental health providers, peace officers, school personnel, parents, and any other person who has responsibility for the care or treatment of the minor to notify law enforcement or the Arizona Department of Child Safety of the possible neglect, injury, abuse, or abandonment of a child. ARS 13-362A is commonly known as Arizona's mandatory reporting law. If Adams had confessed his abuse to a non-religious counselor or a teacher who failed to report the abuse to police or DCS, then they could be prosecuted for a felony. But ARS 13-3620A exempts clergy from mandatory reporting if the clergy's religious organization relies on confessional counseling and if information about abuse is obtained through a confidential practice. Attorneys for the Mormon Church, the same church who above was calling for peacemakers, are arguing to the Court of Appeals on February 25th that a church has no duty to prevent its members from harming each other, even if one member is a young child. Yeah, I can see that this is exactly what Jesus would want. In addition, the church argues the mandatory reporting exemption clearly applies in the Adams case. Further, they argue that Mormon doctrine required the bishops to maintain sacred confidence over confessions and other confidential discussions unless the penitent, Adams, waived the privilege. A legal briefing filed by the church ahead of oral arguments contends the fact Herod and Mousy did not have a basis to know of or suspect that Paul Adams had abused any child other than what the two learned via confidential communications. Let's compare this to Elder Sore's statement from earlier where he says, "These virtues flowing from a flourishing and diverse religious landscape serve to mend and tighten the fabric of our shared world in ways perhaps nothing else can, leading in turn to the united and peaceful societies for which we yearn." I think the Mormon Church needs to deal first with what's going on inside of the halls of the church office building before they try and branch out to world peace. And last up today, let's finish with this great quote that says, "No person is your friend who demands your silence or denies your right to grow." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.